Hi, everyone. This is Angasa with Southern Marylanders for Racial Equality. I'm sorry that we had to move links, so we had a technical difficulty earlier. Um, so I wanted to start by introducing myself since I had not done so. My name is Angasa Echile McKenzie, and I decided to start this group very recently to address all of the concerns that we had around race nationwide, but most importantly in our region, which is Charles, Calvert, and St. Mary's counties. So I want to introduce our moderator again. Her name is Dr. Trinace Richardson. She's a motivational speaker. She is the founder of Real Women, and she is a coach for women's leadership. And she is gracious enough to be with us today. Dr. Richardson, I'm going to let you carry it away.
Thank you so much, Angasa. And for those of you who are coming in late because of the confusion with the technical difficulties, thank you for your cooperation and your long suffering. We really appreciate it. For those of you who may have missed this and you are watching the recording, because of the technical difficulties, we sincerely apologize. We all do the best that we can, and then we cross our fingers and allow technology to take over. And so it's our endeavor that this conversation will still be rich and rewarding for you so that you can get a lot of information from a lot of significant key figures in our community. And so that's what we endeavor to do. We thank you, Angasa, for the vision and the desire to see Southern Maryland come together in such a forum as this to address this other pandemic that is happening in our country right now, racial inequality. It has been a pleasure to work with you. So once again, this is now our second of many gatherings for the Southern Marylanders for Racial Equality Community Group. We are elated to have representation from the public educational arenas of all three counties in our region. So if you do happen to be on with us right now, it's not too late for you to share this live video link with someone so they can join our Facebook Live conversation or our YouTube link. And if you are sharing about this town hall on social media, feel free to use the hashtag SOMD for the number 4, racial equality, or just RE, whichever way, if you want to shorten it. And of course, Black Lives Matter if you choose to do so. I want to make sure that we test it out. So if any of you all are in contact with any of us who are personally on the panel right now, if you wouldn't mind putting in the YouTube chat, if you can hear me clearly, please let us know if you can hear me. And Angasa, if you could let me know if you get any answers about that.
Well, my husband says we're good.
Okay, that's good. I take your husband's word for it. That's great. All right, so I feel comfortable moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. It's my honor and my pleasure to be your moderator for tonight's town hall. And as the moderator, it is my responsibility to remind you of your role and responsibility in tonight's discussion as an attendee and a community member. You see, over the past few days we've advertised in the Facebook group that you were invited to send your questions in advance. And thankfully, some of you did that. So we're going to start off with a few of those questions, but we would love for you to chat in your questions either through the Facebook group or on YouTube. And Angasa and I are standing by ready to capture as many of those questions as possible to get as many answers for you as possible. We're still good, Angasa?
Yes, we're still good.
Okay. Good. As you are already aware, we don't have long. We've already had a little bit of chunk of time taken up with technical difficulties, so we won't keep you more than an hour or so, but we're going to get to all of our panelists with as many of your questions as possible. The great thing to remember is that this is just the first of many educational conversations that we will continue to have to move us towards significant change and visible, tangible racial equality for all. All right, it's imperative that we all remember that this gathering is a safe space for us to ask questions, voice concerns, and propose ideas for making change. And that safe space means that we're all open and honest while at the same time being respectful of each other and our panelists. We're not afraid of disagreement and tough conversations. All of us have had to do that because it not only pushes the current envelope but it allows us to see future change. But we will not acknowledge any disrespectful comments being made in the chat. In fact, we are prepared to remove and block anyone if we perceive you as deterring us from the goal of moving forward and answering questions and getting solutions tonight. I think those are all the public service announcements. So let's move forward. I'd like to introduce our panel, but before I do, I just want to remind you, you can put your questions in the chat and we will get to them after we ask some of the questions. They want to turn, someone needs to turn their volume down. All right. As I call your name and share your role in the community, I would ask that you wave at the people or say hello. You may need to unmute just in case your camera is not working when I say your name. Just want to wave or a hello at this point because we're going to start by getting a question out to all of you. We have Dr. Kim Hill with us, and she is the superintendent of Charles County Public Schools.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you for being with us. We have Dr. J. Scott Smith, Superintendent of St. Mary's County Public Schools.
Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Dr. Daniel Curry, Superintendent of Calvert County Public Schools.
Good evening. Sorry, my camera is not working.
That's okay. We still hear you clearly, sir. We have Dr. Maureen Murphy, President of the College of Southern Maryland, all three counties.
Glad to see you. Thank you.
Oh, good to see you. Thank you for being here. We have Donovan Weekly, a youth leader representing the St. Mary's County NAACP. Looking for you to, there you go. Be shy over there, but hello, Donovan. We have Inez Claggett, a Calvert County Board of Education member. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We have Ms. Pamela Cousins of Calvert County Board of Education.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello. We have Ms. Tina Wilson, Charles County Board of Education Vice Chair.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you.
All right. We have Ms. Tajala Battle Lockhart, Charles County parent and member of the Charles County Board of Education.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. And just so you know, you may want to talk up a little bit when you speak, Taj. It's a little low. We have Daughtery Washington, Chair of the Education Working Group for Southern Marylanders for Racial Equality and overall community activist and participant. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and hi, everybody, and thank you for welcoming me.
Good to see you. We have Jamie Davis, top teen and member of the Charles County NAACP.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. And did I miss anyone? I want to make sure I got everybody. All right. All right. And so Angaza and I are pleased to have you all here with us. Our specific theme for tonight's discussion is schools in a post-George Floyd America. And, you know, we have a lot of pre and post these days, pre and post COVID. There's just so much that has happened in the span of 2020. So we'll be focused on our educational institutions in our counties and how we can address any racial inequalities and disparities that are experienced within them. We know you as parents of school-age children have other questions that are not necessarily race-related. So before we formally get started on and stay focused on the topic of tonight's discussion, we're going to ask each superintendent as well as Dr. Murphy to make a brief statement about where parents can go to share their concerns, ask questions, and find out more about the status of schools reopening, either for the fall semester or the school year, the 2021 school year, in light of COVID-19. And so I'll ask Dr. Hill if you wouldn't mind starting. And then if anyone from Charles County Board of Ed needs to say anything before we move on to the next superintendent, you're welcome to do so. But we just really want to keep this to a brief statement about it so that folks know where to go.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. We know that our community is anxious to learn about how we're going to open in the fall. And our board has engaged the community in making that decision. We've had internal work groups, parent surveys, staff surveys, parent town halls, staff town halls. And then last week, we had a board meeting devoted to nothing but talking about the options. This coming Tuesday, the 14th, our Charles County Board will be having a meeting to vote on a decision to as far as how we're going to move forward. I would suggest members of our public in Charles County keep an eye on the ccboe.com website. And of course, once we make decisions, we'll be using robocalls and emails to let our parents know.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from Charles County? All right.
Good job.
She did good. All right. Dr. J. Scott Smith, if you wouldn't mind sharing about St. Mary's.
Very similar to what Dr. Hill has outlined for Charles County. St. Mary's is following very much the same model. We have had an internal work group. We have expanded it to include community partners and students and parents. We held a virtual town hall 2 weeks ago. We're going to have another town hall next Wednesday. And our board meeting on the 22nd is when we will be unveiling pretty much the final plan, what our intentions are given the, whatever the lay of the land is at that exact moment. Of course, everything is fairly dependent upon other decisions made at a higher level and across the state. Anybody who wants information, if you go to smcps.org, right on the homepage, there's a big button that says recovery planning. It takes you to a site that has all of our information, plus the videos from all the town halls and our recovery plan is being built.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott Smith. Really appreciate that. All right, Dr. Curry, you're on.
Thank you. We are much in the same mode as Charles and St. Mary's County. We've had a lot of teams that include parents. We've had a lot of surveys, and of course, we've got a lot of unsolicited advice as well. That's the way it goes. A lot of folks telling us regularly by email what they think. We have a Board of Education meeting on Thursday, the 16th, and we'll be sharing with the board our plan as it is at that time. And taking input from the board, and then we'll be kind of on an open forum mode for the next couple of weeks, asking folks to participate or probably do a town hall as well. And our aim, of course, just like Scott Smith said, we've got so many factors that still come into play. We're in phase 2, and phase 3 looks a whole lot different. And how the numbers look in Maryland look different too. So anyway, if folks will go to our website, check out the Board of Education meeting agenda, they will be able to see the PowerPoint that will be presented on Thursday. I don't think it's up yet. It should be up by Monday.
Thank you for that. And as a resident of Charles County, thank you all for all of your comments. And I know it seems as though all of you all are doing something very similar by connecting with the community on a very regular basis. I have been a witness to a lot of the Board of Ed meetings where the public gets to share some comments. And so we really appreciate your openness and transparency throughout this process and allowing our input. Thank you for that. All right, Dr. Murphy, would love to hear what's happening at a place that I have some special pride in, College of Southern Maryland.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Yes, we're approaching things a little bit differently. We're in a little bit different space. We announced our plans about a month ago. The fall system is ready to go. In fact, we've never stopped operations when we went remote. We're pioneers in that online space, and we're just going to continue in that vein. For the fall, we are planning 3, 7, and 15-week terms. They're all designed for maximum flexibility. We have our traditional online web-based classes. We have our hybrid classes, which are those hands-on labs only for essential programs, health sciences, some sciences, trades, those sorts of things. And we've implemented a new type of instructional mode called real-time technology. And those are delivered synchronously through real-time technology, very much like what we're in right now. And those classes are not only scheduled to use technology, but they're designed to move back onto a campus should it be safe for us to go back. So we've really looked very hard at what we need to do to respond to COVID. We think that's going to give us maximum flexibility. And the feedback that we're getting from our community and our students is really positive. They understand it and they support it.
Thank you for that. Thank you all for your leadership in kind of walking us through as the public what's happening. And I failed to ask if any of the Calvert County board members had anything they wanted to add to Dr. Curry, or do you give them a thumbs up? All right, we got a thumbs up. Thank you. All right, we hope that your incoming questions are coming, but we're going to start with a question that I think we all want to be, made aware of in this season of so much racial unrest. We'd love for each of you all from each county, and then, we also have, the board members here, so I'll just kind of do it by county again, with the schools as well as the college. What are some initiatives or programs that are in place that you have planned or already implemented that are related to racial equality, anything dealing with the unrest that's happening right now? It might be something you've always been doing or something that you're putting in place as a result of all that's happening right now. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Curry. Dr. Curry, if you wouldn't mind sharing what's happening in Calvert as it relates to planning and implementation of programs.
Sure thing. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. And I apologize again for my camera not working. I did get all dressed up. I am wearing a tuxedo. The Calvert County Board of Education 4 years ago established a strategic plan, and one of the key priorities in the strategic plan was equity. Since that time, there's been a huge focus on equity as led by our supervisor of equity. Every school has an equity liaison. Every school has an equity team. We have been trying to train, teach, listen, and learn, book studies, a lot of those sorts of things. And we're making a lot of growth there and a lot of headway there. It was slow going at first. Last year in Calvert County, we introduced a program called Speak Up. It's from Teaching Tolerance, and it's just trying to give everyone the tools to address hate speech up front, not sit back and say, wow, that wasn't very nice, but to speak up to the person who is using that speech, speak up. An adult, if you're not comfortable speaking to that person, share it with someone. And so we'll continue to hit on that this coming school year. We've devised a unit in our Safe Schools program called Cultural Competence and Racial Bias, and 100% of our teachers are required to participate in that training at the beginning of the year. And this summer, our administrative team will be doing a deep dive into how to be an anti-racist with a study of the book Stamped, as well as the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. So those are just a few of the things that we've got going on and have been doing.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Curry. I'd ask Ms. Cousins and anyone else from Calvert who'd like to share, Ms. Claggett, if you feel like those things that have either been in place or are coming down the pike, if you've seen some positive movement as it relates to those things. And anything else you have that you'd like to add about programs in Calvert. Feel free to jump in. Pamela, I think I see you speaking, you got to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I was talking on mute. Actually, yes. So over the previous 4 years, we have seen marked improvements of, at a minimum, the ability to have conversations about race and about equity. So that was a major step in the right direction. And so we're looking forward to ongoing progress in that vein. Additionally, the school board members just approved an anti-racism resolution. And it basically, when we were considering, how to respond to the aftermath of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, we talked as a board on how do we respond to that. And we recognize that we have issues in our school system. Our minority population is below 15% total population. And we do recognize that we have racial inequities and social justice issues. So basically, we decided to make a bold statement about the intolerance and the fact that we will not continue to allow any of this behavior in our schools, and come, to assign consequences and accountability to those actions as well. So it's not a huge issue that we're having, but it's been ongoing, and there definitely needs to be some measures in place to hold people accountable for the behavior.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Ms. Clack, any thoughts?
And I will piggyback on what Ms. Cousins said. I have been on the board for 2 years as an appointed member. And after passing of the anti-racism resolution, I plan to work through some of our policies and try to take a look at some of the processes and procedures that the superintendent has in place, and try to be collaborative and to work through those to ensure that they are in line with our anti-racism resolution. I would like to also, be collaborative and try to work with him and staff to examine our curriculum to ensure that we have things in place that are culturally competent in our curriculum, and that our staff is culturally competent and aware and are able to teach a curriculum that shows signs of Black boys and girls, brown boys and girls, and celebrates different races.
Thank you for that. So important. Thank you. Dr. Hill, if you wouldn't mind sharing what's happening in Charles County as it relates to racial equality.
Thank you. Much like what Dr. Curry spoke of, we're doing a lot of training with our staff. For context, for the viewers and the listeners, we have just over 27,000 students in Charles County Public Schools, 72% of whom are non-white. And we are very, very proud of the achievement of our non-white students. When I think about equity, I think about the elimination of gaps. And so just a couple of figures that we're very proud of. Our graduation rate for all students is 94.6%. Our graduation rate for African-American students is actually 0.3 of a point above that at 94.9%. So we're very proud of that. As far as student leadership goes, the president of our Charles County Association of Student Councils, over the last 7 years, 71% have been African American. Our student members of the board, over the last 11 years, 73% of those student members are African American. 60% of the students enrolled in AP courses are African American. So we're proud of those things, but we know we still have a long way to go. Our board members who are with us tonight, I believe Ms. Battle Lockhart has been working on our equity committee, and we are working on creating a distinct equity policy. What we've done in the past is we've had equity kind of woven through all of our policies, but our board goals very clearly state an emphasis on equity for students, and we're working through creating a standalone equity policy to drive our decisions as we move forward. And I would yield to Ms. Battle Lockhart or Ms. Wilson to add anything.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Ms. Wilson and then Ms. Battle Lockhart.
Well, thank you again. This is a great opportunity to share with the public that a couple months ago, the Charles County School Board passed a resolution on inclusion and diversity. So we're very forward-thinking and progressive. It was actually a student member that initiated the discussion, and kudos to our fellow board member, Mr. David Hancock, that actually put together the final product, of course, with some input from the other board members. So we're very proud of the fact that we do have an inclusion and diversity resolution on the books. And we also have designated June Inclusion and Diversity Month. Second, Dr. Hill mentioned about the equity policy. Our chairman has been an active participant of the Maryland Association of Board of Education, their ad hoc committee on diversity, and has been working very hard to push the policy. We anticipate that the equity policy for Charles County will probably come before the board, maybe as early as next month. And so kudos to the subcommittee, including Ms. Lockhart and Mr. Mike Lucas for being on that committee, and also to Kim Harrison, our equity and inclusive officer. So we're committed to diversity. Dr. Hill is very modest in terms of not sharing a number of things that she has initiated, particularly with her Leadership Institute that typically takes place at the beginning of the year. I can share with the public that over the course of 6 years that I've had a relationship with the Charles County Board of Education, whether it be as 4 years as the education chair of the local branch of the NAACP, or now as a board member, I can see clearly that steps have been made to improve the situation here in Charles County. And again, it's a work in progress. We do realize that more work needs to be done, but clearly in terms of professional development and focus, it's evident, the proof is in the pudding, and the lines of communication, both from the public, but I will tell you as a board member with Dr. Hill, and having those very courageous conversations about diversity, it's happening. It may not be happening as fast as many people would like, but I can tell you that we're making a lot of progress. So thank you.
They said a mouthful. Yes, I have the pleasure to be a part of the Equity Task Force, and we have worked extensively up until COVID happened on a regular basis through training, and we really have had the opportunity to dissect, if you will, the entire system and looking through it from different lenses. Literally, we have representatives from every part of the system. So it's been very enlightening for me, because as you guys know, I'm very involved in being visible, making sure I'm hearing what's going on in the system. So that process is going phenomenal. It's great that people are willing to be honest in a safe space, because that's what I've been creating for them, to be able to know that this is a safe space that they can share anything that they want with me. And as soon as I made that clear and they felt the energy was sincere, they opened up, and we have really been delving in to really see that we make sure that we are in alignment with all things equity. So I'm looking forward to see, like they said, we just finalized the policy and it's going to be brought before the board soon. And after that, we'll continue the work, because it's going to be a phased-in approach. With anything, it's going to take time. But now we started, and I'm looking forward, and I'm proud to be a part of the process. So we got some great things that we're bringing to the table. So I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. We are endeavoring to clear up some static
And so I'm just going to ask when it does get better that you in the audience would let us know that it's getting better. And would also ask that, Angaza, if you are able to mute yourself, that you would mute yourself. I think that may help as well. Okay. And I want to read a statement while we're at Charles County, and then ask the next county to go. We do have a statement from Virginia McGraw, who is the chair, who could not be here, and the statement kind of says it. She's the Charles County Board of Education chair, and she's well represented by her board, but did want this to be read. It says, "Good evening. Thank you for the invitation to participate in the Education Town Hall for your organization. You have invited a great cross-section of educators and community members to contribute to the discussion on racial equality. This is a topic that is both timely and in need of immediate attention. Unfortunately, I'm unable to participate in the town hall on July 10th. I already made a commitment to be a part of another event the same evening. However, I would like to share some thoughts on the topic. I'm currently a member of the Maryland Association of Board of Education, as already been mentioned, ad hoc committee on equity in education. I have served on this committee at the state level for 3 years. The goal of this committee has been to ensure that every county in the state of Maryland creates a policy that addresses equity by providing guidance in developing a policy. I do believe that one solution to racial disparity is to have a comprehensive county-wide policy with goals, guidelines, and expectations. Charles County is in the process of creating an equity policy, and 2 of our board members serve on that committee. Again, I thank you for the invitation to participate in this worthwhile event, and wish you much success." Wanted to make sure that we read that because she took the time, even though she could not be here, to do this with us. So grateful for that. All right. And so we'd ask, let's see, that we move on to Dr. Scott Smith, if you wouldn't mind sharing what's happening in St. Mary's County as it relates to this racial equality issue we are dealing with.
Well, thank you for the opportunity again to be part of a panel and to share what we're doing in St. Mary's County. And my comments tonight come on behalf of my office and the school system, but also the Board of Education. I did inform them that I would be speaking about my work, our work, their work, and our responses tonight. We find ourselves really in the middle of Calvert and Charles County. I attended with board members the big conversation I think about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and following that we recognized that we need to be much more explicit in our work. And at that time we planned for and then convened and established an equity task force. And the first thing that the equity task force fell to in their work was the crafting of an explicit educational equity policy that would be presented publicly, discussed, and ultimately adopted by the Board of Education. All of that work happened last year over the summer into the fall, and in December the Board of Education adopted policy ACA, educational equity, in which they outline the expectations for all facets of the school system to use an equity lens to review all aspects of policies and procedures to address inequities and outcomes that we find. And we have, just like all school systems, we have some persistent inequities. We do feel quite heartened by our graduation rate, which is very similar to Charles County, where we find that there is almost no gap between our African-American students and all other students. And we find ourselves with an on-time graduation rate exceeding 92% students. So we know that the one thing we have in St. Mary's County, as in all the other, we have great persistence on behalf of the staff and our parents and our community, and our kids do complete their time quite successfully within the school system. The Educational Task Force got together. They wrote a policy. Of course, that's just the beginning of the work. That's the words. That's the vision. That's the vision for moving forward. After that, then comes the work of policies and regulations and the measurable outcomes, and then the way in which we're going to hold ourselves publicly accountable. That work has been predominantly completed and will be shared at our upcoming Board of Ed meeting on July 22nd. Also at the Board of Ed, July 22nd meeting, we will be talking about how we are putting action to our words by realigning resources within the school system to really make a focused department devoted to educational equity and engagement and early access. So we have a fantastic professional working with us, Ms. Adrienne Dillahunt, who is our coordinator of educational assurance, and she will be joined by several other incredible peers as we move forward with the work. I was asked, although to keep it brief, and I will keep it brief, something really special that perhaps we're doing as a result of all of the things that have happened in the last 4 months, to include the what we're going through with the pandemic. And on June 29th, I'm really proud of St. Mary's County. I've been working very closely with Dr. Mina Brewster, who's our health officer. Obviously, all the superintendents have been working really closely with their health officers in their county. As well as Sheriff Cameron, as we've been talking about how best to work with our students in particular as they organize and protest and make their voices heard. Donovan Weekly, I have had the absolute pleasure and joy of knowing him for the past 4 years, and I can speak to the caliber of the young man. We all got together, Dr. Brewster, Sheriff Cameron, and myself, and said, we need to make a statement as well, but we want to make a resolution, and we want it to then set up and move towards something. So on June 29th, we signed a joint resolution pledging that all 3 of our public agencies would work together to address inequities and also confront racial injustice and recognize that everybody needs to have equal opportunity and equal outcomes, and recognize that it's not just one organization that can really, that must address it. It has to be all organizations working in concert in a school system. So if you haven't read the resolution, I encourage you to go out and find it and read it. They're words, they are really words to live by. And I know that Dr. Brewster, Sheriff Cameron, and myself, we're committed to it. And at the end of it, it says that we're going to set up the task force. We've already met twice in the last 2 weeks. And next week, I have our assurance coordinator, equity assurance coordinator, Ms. Dillahunt, is going to actually present to the sheriff's command staff and representatives from the Health Council what we've done as a school system with applying an equity lens to what we do and how we do it, and help them consider how they might be able to model and fold in some of the learning that we've had, and then apply it to their organization. So I think that's really kind of unique when Dr. Brewster, who is the originator of it all, who holds so deeply passionate the inequities that that's just been drawn out into the glare light with all that's been going on, and certainly underpinned by health inequities in St. Mary's County. When we look at the disparities of the way in which the pandemic has impacted our constituents in St. Mary's County, across the state of Maryland, across the United States, it's really passionate work. And I think that great minds coming together are going to be able to do even more for all of our people in St. Mary's County. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I look forward to hopefully some really, really good questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott Smith. Make sure I unmute myself. We seem to have fixed the static issue. We're working on the technology as we hear from you. So thank you, our audience, for that. And you have hopefully heard some really wonderful initiatives that are taking place in our secondary school system. And we want to continue that conversation. We want to find out, I know, but I'd love for Dr. Murphy to share some of the wonderful things that are happening at College of Southern Maryland that would move us forward in this area of racial equality.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm glad that everything cleared up just in time for me to speak so everybody can hear this. Community colleges are social justice through education, and we have been since our founding. So this equity framework is sort of built into our policies, into our structures, really since our inception. We were designed and created to give opportunities to people who didn't have them otherwise, and it's work that we continue. We're passionate about it. We believe in it. I mean, we're almost like equity missionaries when it comes to this. Equity work is really hard. It's ongoing, and it's something that we always have to keep in the front of our minds. It's very, very important. especially now. There is not one person. We cannot afford to lose one person in this world right now. And we need, in our role as educators, to wrap our arms around every single person and help them achieve what they can. The College of Southern Maryland has done a very good job thus far. We've been recognized twice by the Aspen Institute as one of the top 150 community colleges in the nation. And one of the things that we are recognized for in that recognition is our improvement of equity indicators. So we measure how our students do, we measure how our institution does, and we're making continual progress. A little over a year ago, we joined the Achieving the Dream Network, which is designed to help us improve even more. And we have really ramped up our equity work through Achieving the Dream. And honestly, we are blessed to have a wonderful Chief Equity Officer, Dr. Sybil Anderson, who is really guiding much of what we're doing. And when COVID hit, what we did was accelerate, because we can't stay still. And COVID really has accelerated for all of us a lot of things that we were working on already. And the unfortunate murder of George Floyd has just put an incredible lens on this and really highlighted how important it is that we really continue this work. There's an urgency to it that I haven't felt maybe in my lifetime. And so the confluence of these tragedies that we're experiencing right now, I think, give us an opportunity as a community to really come together and to serve better and to really make that difference that we have intended all along and really haven't done yet.
Whew, yeah, I'm so glad that you really set the tone for all of the work, first of all, that's being done at College of Southern Maryland, and many of all of the initiatives you all have talked about. It really just sets the tone for all that is happening right now. We want to make sure we get to as many of your questions as possible in the audience. What we have also done, we told you that there were a couple of opportunities for you all to send questions in advance, and we set it up so that we would have students as well as representation from our community here with us this time on the panel. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this time over to Angaza, and we're going to check and see if her mic is the issue. We'll find out in just a moment. You all can let us know in the chat if it's worse or better as a result of Angaza sharing with us. Angaza, you want to take a moment to pop in so that we can get this question and involve our students and our community member? I'm waiting to see, we're waiting to see if you all can hear Angaza right now. And sure. Yeah, we're waiting. We're waiting for someone, some wonderful soul to let us know. They're saying they cannot hear you. So.
Back on. Is that better?
And you may want to keep talking just to check and see.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Is she being heard now, Felicia and Stacy and Samira? Can you hear her now?
All righty. So I want to first introduce Teen Jamie Davis. She is the Top Teens of America Southern Maryland chapter president, and she's part of the Charles County NAACP Youth Council as well. She attends a private school, and tonight she's representing students who are not in traditional public schools. Take it away.
Hi, thank you for having me. I just want to say that this is going very well so far, considering the technical difficulties. But I did have, I have a few questions. My first one for Dr. Hill, do you happen to know what the statistics are for private schools, like what the graduation rates and those who are African Americans that are in AP classes?
I do not have those numbers. I'm sorry, I can't speak intelligently to that, so I'll keep quiet.
That's fine. Does anybody from like Calvert or St. Mary's have those numbers either?
No.
I'm sorry, I don't know that there's any, I don't know if there's a reporting mechanism that disaggregates student performance data for private schools.
Thank you. So my next question is, if students don't feel comfortable about speaking with a non-African American teacher or counselor on racial inequalities that happen in their school, how should they go about that? Because I know for myself, I don't want repercussions to go back on myself or the teacher that I've spoken to who is African American about a certain situation. So is there a certain way that how we can go to the leadership, but it be diverse more?
And I'll unmute to ask you specifically who you'd like to ask, but also when you say you more diverse, you're asking maybe who, when you direct a question to someone because of something that's happened, you like to feel more comfortable about who you're asking, who you're bringing the problem to. Is that what you're sharing, Jamie?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe who do students go to when they're in the county and there's an incident that may happen related to race issues? Do you all have any thoughts about where a student might feel comfortable going so that they don't feel like I heard Jamie say that themselves or the teacher wouldn't necessarily get repercussions, is what I heard you say, Jamie.
Yes, I feel as if when we go to a teacher, yes, something is done, but it's not done to where it stops the situation completely.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's good.
Gotcha. All right. Where are you a citizen? What community are you in? Which county are you in, Jamie?
Charles County.
Okay. So maybe Dr. Hill, would you like to start?
Sure. Jamie, first of all, Jamie and Donovan are examples of our future. And as Dr. Smith was saying, you know, our students really are the future. And I have tremendous hope for the future because the students that we serve in Charles, and I know the students that are in the Tri-County area, are very active in this conversation and really in many ways leading the way when it comes to demonstrating and sharing their voice and their experiences. So Jamie, if there is an incident that a student wants to report in a school, what we work really hard to do is to develop relationships between students and teachers so that race doesn't come into the equation of, oh, well, I can only go talk to that teacher because that teacher looks like me. The research will tell you that the teachers in Charles County don't look exactly like the students in Charles County, and that's true nationwide. We are working very hard to recruit teachers that represent the demographics of our community. But I will tell you, as a white woman who has lived in Charles County for almost all of her life, you don't have to be a certain race to care about the achievement and the experiences of all races. And that takes trust, and that takes time. And so there's no magic answer to developing those relationships. My colleagues in Calvert and St. Mary's are doing the same sorts of things we are in training our adults on how to develop positive relationships with students, training adults about things like adverse childhood experiences, sometimes called ACEs, and how they impact a child's performance at school or a child's behavior at school, how to understand perspectives different from your own. So I hope that helps. It's not a perfect answer, but I hope that helps to explain where we are as the adults.
Yes.
So I'm just going to advocate that. I think what I hear Jamie saying, and I know I had talked to Jamie offline yesterday, is a school culture question. So how are you all as school leaders helping the school culture so that kids feel safe reporting when racial incidents? Do you have current reporting guidelines for the students? I'm just going to piggyback off of Jamie's question, and I thank her so much for asking it because it takes a lot of bravery for a young person such as yourself to come here and speak truth to power. But really, beyond training, how is the school culture fostering an environment where children who are of color feel safe reporting to staff who might not look like them.
And
And
maybe we could ask one of the other counties. If
yes,
they'd like to do
that'd be
that.
great.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in on that. That's perhaps one of the things that's on my list that we have to work on. It's always somewhat surprising when former students come back while in college and share with us some stories of things that happened while they were in school. Share with, and we say, well, who'd you report that to? Well, I didn't, because they don't do anything. They're never going to do anything. And so that's what's, I find that particularly concerning, that there is a presumption among many students that why speak up because no one's going to do anything anyway. So we've got to do a better job of finding a greater variety of avenues for reporting racist behavior of both students and staff. We have hotlines and things like that that are about safe schools. But and I'm a big fan of student voice. So perhaps when we get the kids back, whenever that might be, we've got to do a better job of using student voice to help us understand why they might have a perception that no one does anything. Help us understand where they would feel better. If there needs to be a specially identified ombudsperson for racial issues in particular for students to go to, maybe we need to consider something like that. Like Dr. Hill said, we all prefer to think that every student has a decent relationship with at least one staff member who they feel they could confide in safely. But we find out too often that's not so.
Right. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to jump in there, and Dr. Curry, just saying the piece about the ombudsman, that's the first solid thing that I've heard so far. And I'm glad that was brought up. There have to be concrete solutions, because it's not a matter of changing the student's perception, because as minority children, the world treats them a certain way, right? So it's not a matter of changing their perception. It's our job as adults, right, to create those pathways for them, right? And that's our responsibility. So giving hard solutions, that's what we're here for. I'm really glad that you said that. I don't want to cut everybody short, but I do want to get to our next young person. But that little nugget, thinking about ways in which minority students can come to you and have a certain reporting guideline that that they're made aware of would be great. And we're going to go to Donovan. Donovan Weekly is with us. He is a youth from St. Mary's NAACP. He is the first chair of the St. Mary's County Youth Advisory Commission. He is also a co-organizer of the June 5th Black Lives Matter protest in Leonardtown, and a class of 2020 STEM graduate from Great Mills High School. So I just want to give Donovan an opportunity to ask his question.
Thank you guys for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for everybody to come together and discuss an issue that's a little bit harder for us to discuss via traditional means. You said social distancing and just the difficulty with meeting in person. So my question is, with some gaps in mind regarding racial disparities, what will be the metrics of success moving forward? In other words, how do you plan on quantitatively keeping track of progress towards your racial equity goals?
And then I'll ask again, Donovan, if you can remind me which county you're in.
I'm from St. Mary's County.
Yep, there we go. All right, St. Mary's, Dr. Scott Smith.
So two things. Back to the other question brought forward by Ms. Davis. We got close to it, and Dr. Hill referenced that it's how does a school, how do teachers build trust with students, and how do we create a climate and a culture where you can say how you feel, and somebody doesn't try to discourage the way you feel or modify the way you feel but respects the way you feel, and then talks about how changes can be made to make you feel better and respond. For the last 5 years, I've done SLAC, which is the Superintendent's Leadership Advisory Committee. Donovan's been a member and then a steering committee person and really govern that work. And that whole thing was about how do we get kids in schools to tell us what's going on? How do we encourage voice? You can tell a student, hey, I'm here to listen, but they won't take you up on that unless they, going back to the first thing, trust you. So I want to just recognize Donovan for being, really a part of bringing many things to light and talking about that and moving us towards annual summits where we talk about what's in the minds of kids and it's driven by kids and supported by kids and organized by kids. And that's incredibly important because schools don't exist for us. They really don't. They exist for kids. And but back to Donovan's point, what gets measured gets done. And so what's the big metric, and then what are the other metrics? I think that Dr. Hill and Dr. Curry will tell you, and I'll tell you the same thing. The big number is the graduation rate, on-time graduation rate, making sure that we don't see light between groups. Like everybody is getting to that bar, and that's the first part. And the second is starting to delve into that transcript of that graduate and say, did we prepare them for what they want next? Are they prepared to enter directly into an employment that's appropriate and professional and can take them where they want to be? Or are they ready to, and we've helped them bridge the gap and go into a community college or a 2-year program? We've been doing a lot of work in St. Mary's County, as have both of my colleagues with the College of Southern Maryland, and making that not a bridge, putting Southern, a college experience in a high school, so that you push that either together. That's going to be a metric I want to hang my hat on when I'm done with this contract in 3 years. I want to see every single child who graduates from St. Mary's County, regardless of their background, race, creed, color, that they have all graduated in 4 years. They all have a transcript that reflects their passion and their competence, that they have an AP course or a college course or some kind of a technical skills attainment that's recognized by a credentialed body that you can be gainfully employed right out of high school. We're very close. I want to see one to begin with, and I want to see a whole raft of, and then at the end of them, I want them to have an associate's degree, and I want them to be Donovan Weekly and have whatever you have 12 or 13 AP courses, and because then the world's open to you, and we really have then created equity through education, and that's our mission. That's why we are here doing what we're doing.
Thank you. I also want to give a chance for our education working group chair, which is Daughtry Butler Washington, and to ask her question.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak and ask the question. And I want to let you know, both Calvert and St. Mary, we have parents that are on our working group. So your voices are being heard, and they have some of the same concerns as Charles County do. And our question is, we wanted to know, would you strongly support building a multicultural history into our core curriculum? Before you answer that, the reason we ask that question is because, our youngest students, they don't know race. We all know they are taught race. So by mandating a multicultural history in our schools will be a win-win for everybody. And most of all, we at Southern Maryland can lead this effort in Maryland to ensure that we combat racial injustice by educating all students in Maryland. So this is a very, very straightforward question, but it's one that is needed. So I'll open it up and let y'all.
Thank you, Daughtry. Multicultural education, teaching accurate history. What say you? Well, I think we should start with Dr. Murphy. She is at the college level, but I think it's very important because even at the college level, we have some gaps here.
Well, we do have gaps, and we measure those gaps. But having said that, we already have much built into our curriculum. We have a long-standing history of having multicultural, diverse programs integrated into our core curriculum, as well as a global initiative. And it's something that we look at very closely. There have recently been some issues in Southern Maryland with other institutions that have not approached things very well, and our programs have been used as a model. Can we do more? Always, always. But I think it's inescapable. What we're trying to do is to provide education that really enlightens and enriches the lived lives of our students. Not the students we think we should have, the real people who come through our doors and what they need to know and understand. Southern Maryland is in particular a very rich historical place that opens up lots of opportunities for just tons of different perspectives just because of the nature of it. And I appreciate this idea that Southern Maryland could be a leader in this space. And I applaud that. And I think that that is something that we are well poised to do.
Absolutely.
And we're happy to be a part of that work. We are happy to be a part of that work.
Dr. Hill? The question was about multicultural education. Would you support changing the curriculum to include more multicultural education?
Right, and I couldn't agree more with Dr. Murphy in that we are trying to make sure that K through 12 multicultural education is what our students are receiving. But I think post George Floyd, the reason for this town hall is that we all will take another look. The state of Maryland is looking right now at its social studies standards. Those of us in the public school districts, we follow the state standards in curriculum, in developing curriculum and developing lessons, but we have some local decision making, and we can take another look at those standards and make sure that all races and all peoples are represented fairly, and to make sure that the history that's being taught is the history that occurred, not the view of a lot of the writers of textbooks in the 1980s and the 1990s and even the early 2000s, where many of those texts were written by predominantly European background folks. So we'll move along with the standards that the state provides, but we will take a fresh look at what we offer. We do offer a course in African American history in high school. It's an elective course, but it is a well-received course in our community.
Okay, and would anyone else like to jump in on that? We have some more questions to get to from the internet, so I want everybody, please be brief if you can.
Dan here. I just concur with Kim in that we've been undergoing a review for quite some time of our content, of our literature selections, of the authors who we draw upon for our English classes and literature classes. Our libraries have undergone a significant review of what is available to check out as well. We unfortunately have, we always offer African American history in our high school course electives, and unfortunately there's been a number of years where there haven't been enough sign up for it. Maybe we need to go ahead and have it, even if we only have a handful. But everyone right now is certainly of a mind to further review and discuss. And I think, I'm learning a lot in reading some of the books that we've mentioned, like How to Be an Anti-Racist and Stamped and things like that, that the more we put those books out in front of our faculty, the more much of that information is going to find its way into the content in a lot of different ways.
Thank you. So before we move to Dr. Richardson, she's going to take some of our internet-based questions. I just want to say that as we're considering multicultural education, it's not simply adding an African American history class. I don't want to minimize what you already have, but also reviewing the current textbooks that are being used in your U.S. history class. Because if they still refer to the civil rights movement as trouble ahead or slavery as Blacks were brought to this country to work, I mean, some of these things are just not sufficient. And I think all of those texts should be reviewed. And I'm biased because my sister is a professor of African studies and I am a graduate of an HBCU. So I am biased in that way that history has to be complete. it has to be told from all perspectives, and that includes Native perspectives as well. Daughtery, did you have a follow-up?
More question. I know a lot of people say elective, but what I'm driving it to is our core curriculum, meaning that
Right.
every
Right.
student must take it.
Exactly.
That's the only way it's going to, not whoever want to take it, but every student, because when we have all the students take it, we will get the benefits at the end, because our students will be able to combat this and have an intelligent discussion on any race.
That is true at the college level.
Okay.
This has been, and I think we're already, you know, we can't be here all night, but I think we are well into a really good meaty discussion about what is happening and what can possibly happen more as it relates to all of this. And so I do have a question that I want you all to consider before I call on one of our panelists. I'm going to give you the question because I want you to think about it and let me know who would like to answer it. The question from Linda in the chat is, are the recruiters from Charles County, Calvert County, and St. Mary's County focusing on recruiting teachers at HBCUs in order to recruit diverse educators, though there are less education majors in education programs right now? And so I'm going to come back to that question. I think there was a follow-up. We want to make sure our board members get an opportunity to chime in. And I believe that Ms. Battle Lockhart had a comment about something that was said earlier.
Daughtery beat me to it, but I just want to provide some clarity that that's what she was saying is that it should not be an elective. If we do not want to be divided any longer, we have to be inclusive in everything that we're learning. So I concur to what she says. So thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you guys were on the same page. Okay, so does one of the superintendents or even board members, would you like to tackle that one as it relates to recruiters and really recruiting from a diverse pool, specifically HBCUs was the question.
Yeah, the HBCUs are certainly a target for all of our recruiters, and it's still the pool is very small. The pool is it just remains to be small, and there are all of us. Every school superintendent I talk to, one of their priorities is to diversify the professional staff. And so it's a heavy competition out there. But yes, HBCUs are definitely important.
This is typically a quick one, so I'll ask the rest of you if you'd like to answer that one, Dr. Scott Smith as well as Dr. Hill.
We're the exact same thing. We compete. We are sending all of our recruiters to HBCUs. We're trying to get in before people actually complete their studies and complete their programs to see if we can put a contract in front of them so they can sign even before they get Howard County or Prince George's County or Montgomery County comes and offers them $8,000 plus a signing bonus to go there. It's an absolute challenge. And I look to really incredibly gifted young people, and I see that they're not considering becoming a teacher or being involved as in education. They're not looking at it as an option. Taylor can tell, Donovan and Taylor can tell you how often I try to beg and cajole them to consider, hey, I know you want to go off and be doctors and what stuff, but it really is, it's a challenge. And the one thing that we found is it's more about when we finally hire somebody, making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to have them become part of the school community and the larger community, so that they have a really great experience, so that they can go out and tell everybody that they meet, hey, really consider coming to our county and consider working for our particular school system. And St. Mary's County still has some vacancies, so go ahead and visit our website. And if you are interested, we're really eager. I'll drive up and meet you.
So I'd like Ms. Wilson to talk about her experiences from Charles County. We have a strong focus on recruiting and retaining diverse candidates, and Ms. Wilson, as a board member, attended one of our recruiting trips. And Ms. Wilson, will you share? Unmute.
Unmute for us.
So Dr. Hill knows that this particular topic is near and dear to me personally. I went to an HBCU in the state of Maryland. There are 4 HBCUs, and as all the superintendents have already stated, it is a crisis. And my frustration is that we continue to ask questions, and it's a good question, but the great thing about being on this this forum, this town hall, is it's time, as one of the individuals talked about, we need to have solutions. And I actually went to my alma mater, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which at one time was a big producer of teachers. Several family members graduated from the institution. You know, in the days you either went to an HBCU to teach or preach, persons of color are going into fields that are making a lot more money. And it is time, if there's one issue, that it is time to literally confront our state legislators as well as the governor and saying, we need to combat this issue. We need to be creative in creating incentives. We need to create discussions with our young people about challenges in the classroom. You know, they experience it themselves and then they go off to college, and you say to them, would you like to be a teacher? And then they think about the challenges that's in the classroom. This is a problem that we really need to pull the layers on the onion back and take a look at. But we can't talk about having more Black doctors or more Black engineers or more dentists or any of the professions if we can't tackle having more persons of color in the classroom. It's a good question to say, are you going to an HBCU? And in Charles County, St. Mary's and Calvert, we're crawling over each other trying to recruit from a small base. Last year, I went to UMES to recruit, and there were only 8 candidates for HBCUs. There is no, and I think last year, Dr. Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, we needed 300 teachers. And at this recruiting fair, there was at least 40 to 45 school districts competing for those 8 students. So it's time to move on the point of, are you going to the HBCUs? And for that matter, people of color go to other institutions. So we need to sit down with our state legislators, come up with incentives, and we also need to make the profession of teaching respectful, like it was, and respected like it was many, many years ago. And so I would love to continue this conversation, because I know there's other questions that you want to go to. But when you brought this one up, this has been something of a journey for me for 6 years. And we keep beating the simple questions. All questions are good, but it's time to expand the conversation on this if we're really going to talk about the social injustices as they pertain to education. We're at a crisis, and it's time to get on board with this.
So, and
Thank you.
Beyond
Oh.
recruiting, retention of diverse teachers is a very, very significant issue. And so, Anga, so you were talking about, so what are we doing?
Mhm.
You know, as superintendents, we think about these large world problems, which always impact what we do. But then I sit and think about, well, what can I do? What can I control? And one thing that I'm going to try, I don't know how it's going to work, but I've created a task force within Charles County of 18 to 20 of my African-American employees across job descriptions, principals, officers at central office, building service staff, secretaries, guidance folks. And I'm going to ask them to come together with me and tell me about their experiences as African-Americans in my organization. What are we doing well? What do we need to do better? How can we make sure you're moving along and being promoted and you're being supported in being promoted? What am I not seeing? Where are my blind spots as the leader of the organization, so that when we recruit African American employees, we can keep them and grow them into leaders?
Thank you. So I have several questions. It is there are so many questions. So I'm going to kind of make a hybrid question. I got one from Dr. Carla Cornegay, and it kind of ties into one that we received from Chef Kendall online. Shout out to those two very active folks in the community. And Carla also is on one of our working groups. So she chairs one. So it says some educators and school administrators find it even more difficult to deal with challenging behaviors of students with disabilities or students who are racially, ethnically, and or culturally different from the teacher or caregiver. Given that, how does CCPS or St. Mary's or Calvert CCPS propose to start addressing and preventing racism and discrimination in the classroom? Now, I tie that into Chef Kendall's question, which was basically, how is the policing done in the schools with regards to Black and brown boys? Because it's a flow. So the teacher complains that the child is unruly. And I know this because I am a teacher by trade. I'm a realtor now, but I was a teacher for several years. And then the SRO comes in, grabs the child, and then some other things happen. But his question is, how do you move from that same scenario that plays out over and over again? The teacher doesn't get the child. There's no other middle resources given, straight to the SRO and out of the building. How do you replace the SROs with maybe counselors or school psychologists? Are there any plans to change around the way funding, training, and support are given?
And then who wants to go first, right?
Well, let's just go. We'll start with whoever wants to jump in there.
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and start, because let's make clear that school resource officers do not suspend students from school. School resource officers do not get involved in discipline unless there's some law issue involved. And then it's a matter of law, not a matter of school discipline. So those are just two separate things there. But certainly it kind of goes back to the issue as far as patterns or any evidence that a teacher's bias is a part of their daily decision making. That's where we hope that our leadership team is awake enough, woke enough to see it and to know it. Certainly.
Well, the stats are there. I don't mean to cut you off, but the stats are there. Black students are suspended at a much more disproportional rate. Yeah, so the stats are there.
No, there is disproportionality in the suspensions. And certainly that's something that we're all looking at and looking at why is that? And is that an issue with a particular, is it a student issue? Is it a teacher issue? Is it an administration issue? There's a lot of different layers to that issue as well. And all of us are looking at first of all, just understanding that suspending a child doesn't change any behavior, and that we've got to do a better job of understanding when such behaviors manifest themselves. That's why Kim mentioned the study of trauma and the impact on student behavior and things like that. So there's a lot of different dimensions to it that we're all trying to learn more about and dig deep into our data.
And I'll just, while we're waiting for someone to jump in, Angaza and I think are both in the same boat about being really passionate about these issues, because the question, I think, bodes well toward how can we be more creative as it relates to addressing the needs of our students rather than disciplining them in the traditional ways that we have in the past. I know some wonderfully creative teachers who have found ways to, in their classroom, implement classroom management in such a way that the most active, the most, the least attentive student gets to be the most the person who participates
Exactly.
the most in order
Exactly.
to keep their attention and keep them going. And so on a school level, on a county level, having those educators who are the most adept and the most creative, maybe funding some of those trainings. There, even in the chat, there's a question about implicit bias and what kind of trainings are done in that way. So those teachers and educators that we've seen who have been the most successful at classroom management, how can we help them translate some of their skill sets to other teachers so that we see less disciplinary issues in the way that we've seen them? I just wanted to add that.
I'd like to jump in here if you don't mind. We've had a happy accident at the College of Southern Maryland in that the Charles County Community Mediation Center is housed on the La Plata campus. And one of the things that we have benefited from is being able to expand mediation to resolve conflicts among people on our campus and our campus community. And we have many folks, particularly within our our Division of Student Equity and Success, who are trained mediators. And we find that often that's a very, very good way to not just diffuse negative energy, but really to achieve understanding between and among groups who are having conflict.
Agree. That's a really good point to bring up, Dr. Murphy. But Dr. Richardson, you talked about training for staff, because there are some folks who are just gifted at establishing relationships with all sorts of children and can get something out of every child. And then there are others who just aren't. And so all three of us in the Southern Maryland area work very hard at trying to train all of our staff to understand. We did this district-wide book study, first time in years, and it was about fostering resilience. It was about restorative practices. This is ongoing. This has been going on 3 years. We're going to our 4th year of restorative practices training across the district, not just for teachers, but for administrators. We've added counselors, we've added psychologists, we've layered in mental health and social emotional learning K through 12. So in our elementary schools, K through 5, every day starts with 5 to 7 minutes of social emotional learning, age appropriate social emotional learning. So when children come to us with adverse childhood experiences and can't understand their own feelings, so they act out, we're helping them to put a name to frustration, put a name to empathy, and understand how to negotiate those feelings. But none of this, I said before, none of this is an overnight, we can fix this. But all of us are working toward moving more toward mental health and social emotional learning. But I will tell you, and I'll tell the audience, I am very thankful and grateful that we have school resource officers in our buildings. They provide a level of safety. They develop relationships that are positive with staff and with students. I don't think it's an either or. I don't think we bring in psychologists and we throw out school resource officers. I think we can marry both of those supports for our kids, and we need to keep working in that direction.
Thank you for that. Anyone else burning to ask that one in our last wrapping up of things before we ask our last couple? Go for it, board member.
I just want to say, as it relates to that, everything goes to relationships, and you have to build a relationship. And I've said this to several people within the system, and sometimes it's like, well, when do you find the time? Well, I became a instructor and a teacher 8 or 9 years ago, didn't know what I was doing. But the fact that I took the time to figure out and understand their stories, to teach students at Job Corps and listen to what their needs were first, in the midst of mixing learning with it, it makes all the difference in the world when you get to know a kid. Most kids that are having challenges with teachers or run into the resource officers is because you're judging them on set. You haven't had the opportunity, you don't want to deal with it, so that's how we get to that point. But we have to, some of these teachers have to understand that that's the way you're going to get to that student. You're going to have to show your heart in order for them to listen and adhere to what you want to say into your classroom. I've had experiences myself as a substitute in Charles County Public Schools. The primary teacher was in the room and could not get the kid to say, to follow her instructions. All I had to do is call his name, and I said, did you ask her, did you understand what she asked you? He says, yes, ma'am, but he wouldn't say anything to her. It's just how you direct the message to them. Delivery is everything. You don't know what's going on in their household. So if they're being talked to any kind of way at home, all they do is see a reflection of whoever that person is doing that to them at home. And they're sick and tired of dealing with it everywhere they go. So take the time out to build those relationships instead of trying to put some handcuffs on them or send them to a resource officer to just pass them off to somebody else to deal with them. That's not the answer. The other answer is, I have to say this, we addressed this earlier, is that we want to celebrate our, I have to say this. We want to celebrate graduation rates. I am a witness from being in Job Corps that we have graduates from high school that come there with their high school certification that they receive, or diploma, what we call it, that has no value, because once we test them, they're at 4th and 5th grade level. So let's be real honest about this if we really gonna have a conversation. Because I don't want this to look all fluffy that, yeah, we agreed to come to a town hall and have a conversation, but let's have a real conversation. And you wanna know when we go recruit why we can't find African-American students in education? Because they're leaving the high school with a high school diploma that has no value. So we have to start in the school delivering the lesson with some substance to make sure that they have the knowledge before they leave. Because my daughter was a witness of that a year ago, is that she thought that she was a B student when she was really a C student. So you're just giving grades for effort. It's not about effort, guys. It's about teaching knowledge. You went to college to learn the skill to teach so you can grow others. Yeah. So make sure that they gain the knowledge that you're trying to deliver to them so they can go say, I learned that from such and such. Because right now, a lot of our students aren't learning anything. Yeah. We're just passing grades and giving out A's and B's. That's how our graduation rates look so great.
Thank you, Ms. Battle Lockhart.
Thank you.
Those teachers who are, and educators who are as passionate as you are, I'm sure they are nodding and all of those things.
Oh yeah.
Agree about the challenges that we are facing as well. I'm going to pass it to Angaza for a question regarding Fresh Start, I believe. Go right ahead.
Yes. And before I jump in, I just want to say a little tidbit. I'm not sure how many of you all school leaders know this, but when the child sees themselves reflected in the curriculum, they statistically do better. I was actually recruited as a senior at Howard University to write SAT questions for that group of SAT tests that were coming out that year. And just changing the name Martina Navratilova to say Venus Williams, literally statistically, students of color would do better on that SAT question and that passage because their confidence level was higher, that yes, I recognize myself. I can look at which answer is attractive and which not. So just keep that in mind when you are going through your curriculum and thinking about how are my students reflected. If everything looks like the other, it's not always hitting home. Just put that out there. Students literally do better when they see themselves reflected. So about the Fresh Start Academy, this is a question that I got several emails about. This is a question that's a hot button issue. It affected me. My daughter actually was bullied by a kid, and that kid, I think, was referred to this program. I didn't know what it was until I started looking into it. So the best question I received was, what is the return on investment? For those of you who are watching and don't know, in Charles County, there was a Fresh Start Academy created for children who were deemed not able to participate in a traditional classroom. I'll let Dr. Hill speak to that, or our board members speak to that from Charles County. And, you know, a lot of questions around, is this Fresh Start initiative producing the results for the kids? Because so far the numbers are really low and there's no data given to the public. The public has no idea how this is working.
Thank you for the question. The Fresh Start Academy, for those who don't know, is a therapeutic program for our youngest learners who we aren't meeting their needs in the regular classroom. There are many gates, I'll call them, to get through before a child can be accepted into the Fresh Start Academy. The Fresh Start Academy is not a place where we just say, oh, well, because Johnny didn't do well in his first grade class at elementary school A, we're going to send him off to the Fresh Start Academy. That is not the truth. There is nothing further than the truth. There is a lot of misinformation out there about the Fresh Start Academy. This program is a cutting edge, innovative program to help our youngest learners re-engage with the curriculum. And we only refer children to the Fresh Start Academy after they have gone through several levels of supports in the regular school. So when you say, or the public says, there is no data out there regarding the Fresh Start Academy, there isn't data out there because there are so few students that have been accepted into the Fresh Start Academy that if we were to put data out there, it may be personally identifiable data. And we're not going to do that to our children. But I can tell you, as someone who is very familiar with what's going on at the Fresh Start Academy, that I am very proud of this program, that it is a way to re-engage our youngest learners so that they do not get involved in the school to prison pipeline. A lot of folks will say, oh, this is the Fresh Start Academy. It's just heading children straight to the school to prison pipeline. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. This is a way to engage early, help children have the supports that they need to then be successful in the classroom.
So I think the question is more of a ROI question, like return on investment. Could that money be better spent keeping them in the classroom? That's the crux of what the several questions I've received about that is. Like, how do you justify the expenditure of the money to separate the children instead of leaving them in situ in the class?
That's a very fair question. If we were to provide the levels of support that we provide at the Fresh Start Academy in every single one of our 22 elementary schools, it would cost over $4 million every year. The investment in the Fresh Start Academy is about $452,000 a year because we are able to garner all of the supports, the resources, the psychological supports, all of those staff members in one place. So the return on investment, as far as from a just purely dollars and cents point of view, is much higher in the model that we're implementing in Charles County.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry. The last, okay, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Are you good? I think you're good. I think you muted yourself.
I did.
Okay.
I think Ms. Wilson has a question.
Sure, go ahead.
A comment?
I just wanted to highlight the fact also that we have challenges trying to recruit behavior specialists and psychologists if we wanted to fill all of these schools. So it's also a resource challenge. And Dr. Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, the parent can opt in or opt out. So it boils down to and I want the public to understand, if the parent or guardian does not want their child to participate, they have that option. It's not being forced upon them. We also have an advisory board that we want to get this right. And these are our most challenging children. And I will tell you, I had the experience maybe about a little over a year ago where I was visiting a school and I witnessed this emotional outburst from a young child. And there were 5 adults trying to comfort that child. And it was clearly evident that the child needs help. And it's one of the most helpless feelings that I personally have ever witnessed. You know, is the scenario or the layout ideal and perfect? It is not. But our teachers, as well as parents that have children that are wanting to learn in the classroom, have witnessed, or their child has come home and said, hey, my friend had a challenge today. And so it's difficult, but we need to get these kids the help that they deserve and that they need. And in an ideal situation, if we had all the expertise and the resources, obviously we would love to be able to put this in each and every school. But in the meantime, given the resources, this is how we're going to proceed. And we ask you guys to share this information to the public because there's a lot of misleading information out there. And it's something the board carefully reviewed and we take very seriously. None of us want to purposely, stem, a child or segregate a child. We want to help and give every child an opportunity. But in those rare occasions, as we go through all these steps, we have something to help these extreme cases.
Yeah.
So please help us get the facts out. And we're going to continue to do our very best to give them the very best.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. This has been challenging and invigorating and meaty. There have been conversations about what we are doing and what we need to do better. And there are tons of questions. I would challenge each of us on the panel to go back to the YouTube Live to read the comments and the questions, because there's no way that we would be able to get to them all, but it would be so useful to go there and read, first of all, the folks that have taken the time out, the 2 hours out that we've spent together. We're about to close. To view, to ask questions, to make comments. And we'd like to start by thanking them for taking time out to come.
Yes.
And next, thank each and every one of you on the panel.
Thank you.
We know that you are constantly putting yourselves in front of various audiences in your community. And this was one more place for you to do that. And so the fact that you've chosen to take this time out of your evening when you're getting ready for a weekend, TGIF, we are really appreciative that you have taken time to be with us. We want to close out tonight by asking about tangible next steps. And so we want you to think about one step, one practical, tangible thing that you believe we should be doing. Some of the things that have come up in the comments and the chat, and we'll kind of go around with the board members first, and then ask the school superintendents and Dr. Murphy to share one. And of course there's a lot of us, so if you be really brief, but everything from, we're appreciative of the anti-racist resolution that has come out. That's something that's tangible. Implicit bias training is something that has come up. We've even seen in some of the comments from the public that literally just holding ourselves as educators, as leaders of educators, accountable for our own implicit bias and what we put out in the universe, in our personal and professional lives. There's so many ways that we can make this tangible as a result of this conversation. And so, and we'll find out if our students have something that they want to add. But I'd love to start with Ms. Claggett, if you wouldn't mind sharing your one step, and we'll just kind of go around if you don't mind.
I would say something tangible that we should work on is to begin to change and to work on school culture. I think that if we start there to begin to work on what teachers see in their students, in each student? How do teachers feel about each of their students? And then what are teachers doing to make sure that their students are feeling safe and supported? And then what are we getting as a result of what teachers are doing in the classroom for each of their students and how they're making their students feel, and holding teachers and our staff accountable for working on their school culture to ensure that each student is coming to school, receiving the resources that they need to be able to have their highest level of achievement.
Thank you, Ms. Claggett. Thank you. Ms. Cousins.
Thank you. I honestly believe the crux of the problem that we're having with our Black and Brown children not being heard, being listened to, being seen, has 100% to do with most likely implicit bias, which we've already talked about. And we can have all the book studies and training in the world, but if a staff member is negatively impacting a student, knowing or unknowingly, it will continue and the problem will persist. So there has to be a mechanism in place to, number one, perhaps identify those high-flying educators or staff members and providing retraining if necessary, or if they're not willing to modify, adjust, recognize this behavior, then perhaps education is not for them, point blank. But I think it has to start with the classroom and in the hallways and in our principal's offices, even at district office, that if we're not recognizing our implicit bias and how it's impacting not just students, but our educators and colleagues, then these issues, systemic racism, injustices, will continue until people are held accountable. On my day job, none of this would happen if people would get away with it. It wouldn't. You would be fired, no questions asked. And it shouldn't be any different in education because we are impacting students for the rest of their lives. And these things could last with them for generations. And we need to cease and desist as soon as we see it, but it takes a trained, culturally competent person in order to make that happen.
Thank you for that, Ms. Cousins. Ms. Battle Lockhart.
I'm sorry. I just say I continue to work on the task force because the work is not complete. So I'm dedicated to that to ensure that the equity is in alignment for what we need in our school system. And, that's my primary focus right now.
Thank you, Ms. Battle Lockhart. Ms. Wilson?
It's been already emphasized, but I think establishing those relationships. And I know as a board member, I think that we need to find ways to find time and space to allow these relationships to flourish. I know firsthand that in Charles County, we're doing a lot of professional development. I know that the superintendent talks quite a bit about relationship building. But the fact of the matter is we're placing a lot on our teachers. And so sometimes we've just got to carve that time and space just for them to kind of interact. And I think that's vitally important. I also think that's what's vitally important is that now that it's not just the awareness, but the consciousness of the country, and let's just say the consciousness of Southern Maryland, that one of the things that as leaders or as citizens in the community, we need to speak in such a way that people listen, and we need to listen in such a way that people are okay in speaking, and that we need to model the appropriate behavior so that our young people see how to conduct themselves. And it goes back to finding time and space to do so. So that's my charter, and there's many tasks that we have to take on, but that is something that I would share in closing, that I would ask for this group to take a look at the community and the diversity that you have in your group, because there's many in the community that don't feel comfortable in having the conversation that may not necessarily be persons of color. So
Yeah.
it's about carving the space. There's a lot of resentment.
Mm-hmm.
The kids see this.
Yeah.
There's white on black resentment, as
Yeah.
well as black on white resentment. There's black on black resentment that's going on. And so we've got to carve out that time and that space and make a commitment that we're going to try to make things better. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to the superintendents now, and we'll check in with Donovan and Daughtery and see if they have any closing remarks once we are done with those, and Dr. Murphy. Dr. Hill, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you for putting this on, and thank you for the opportunity to have this important discussion. Two things that I think are important and that I'll say very quickly. Number one, diversity is a strength. And we've believed that in Charles County for a long time, and it's something that we need to continue to highlight. Second thing is, our teachers have tremendous responsibility on their backs. And any time that society has a problem, we want to funnel it through and have the schools fix it. Teachers in this group, our group, needs to really advocate for higher salaries for teachers. Many of my high achieving Black students who are on my student leadership council, when I say, why won't you become a teacher? Because Ms. Hill, I don't make any money. I need to support a family. So I would ask groups like Southern Marylanders for Racial Equality to advocate with all of our state delegates and anyone who will listen to you.
Right.
Pay our teachers what they're worth.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yep. Indeed.
So good. Thank you. Dr. Curry, over there in Cyberland, what would you like to share your one step briefly?
Well, I'll just reiterate something I said earlier, and that there's still, in my mind, just too many students who tell us that they're not comfortable speaking up because they believe principals and teachers won't effectively deal with issues of racist behavior in students and racist behavior, or perhaps even biased behavior and unconscious biased behavior of staff. And so for me, what I hope to be able to get our high school principals in particular to do, but middle school principals as well, is to tap into student voice to better understand why that is and what we can do so we can make the students more comfortable or give them more tools to let us know, because we can't deal with it if we don't know about it. We want to, and we do want to deal with it. And we want students to know that we will address it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That gets to one of the students' questions, so thank you for that. Dr. Scott Smith.
My next step is a step forward. We're on a path and we're moving forward. At the next board meeting, we'll be looking at all of their recommendations that come forward and are going to be really talking about it. We're going to continue with the joint equity task force. And on a personal level, I will be reconvening the Slack group in the fall when we come back together, and I'll try to draw in some of our former fantastic leaders such as Donovan to help us frame this, because I think this is obviously going to be the conversation that drives forward that group, and that group then goes back to the schools and their principals advisory committee, and it's a web-based kind of getting information back in and out, and I think that that's going to be exceptionally critical in the 2021 school year.
Thank you for that, Dr. Scott Smith. Really appreciate that. All right, Dr. Murphy, what's your next step, or for one step that you would suggest for all of us?
I'm going to ask a favor of everybody. We're having this conversation because right now in our country, things have kind of come to a head, and we're looking really at some very harsh realities. But we live in a world of 24-hour news cycles, and I'm going to ask you never to forget to keep the urgency in this work and to keep it going. It's hard, it's important, and we've all got to keep going. These conversations are a great start, but we can't stop.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Daughtery, would you have any words that you'd like to share as it relates to a next step?
Yes, you know me, I drive home. My one point is to mandate the multicultural history into our core curriculum, not elective, but mandated. Simply because if our students learn at a very early age what everybody experienced, everybody's history, when they begin to grow up, they will do the fight for us. They can even carve out the racial for us. Mm-hmm. So there won't be any, our kids will grow up and say, well, our parents went through this, but I know the difference. So it's no different from me. And then we will accept each other.
Yeah.
So if we do that, and think about it, Southern Maryland are the lead for this. What could this be?
Yeah, yeah.
We seldom is in the lead for anything.
Yes.
But think about Southern Maryland's in the lead for mandating multicultural history. And I'm going to put it on the line. If there is anything needed from going to the superintendent, Maryland superintendent, anything going to Maryland, I sign up. I'm there with you. Because I want to make sure that not just Southern Maryland, but the whole Maryland is educated and have this mandate in their school.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, none of us will leave here not clear about your one next step.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that. I thought it would be appropriate before I hand it off to Angaza to close us out and say goodbye to everyone, that our student who is left, we thank both of them for being with us. But Donovan, what would your suggestion be for us as we move forward as a next step?
Well, thank you all for inviting me to this tonight. It was a really insightful conversation. My next step, and something that I'd really like to see our superintendents of the public schools really spearhead, is this whole idea of an equity hotline. Right now we have a safety hotline in the counties, but it'd be great to have some sort of service where students could anonymously report instances of racism, instances where they feel like they were treated unjustly. And I feel like having some sort of streamlined application through which students can do that, just like the safety hotline, would make a lot more students feel confident in speaking out about their experiences.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Donovan.
Wow.
This is, yeah, that's amazing.
A great idea. Thank you.
With all of the technical difficulties, I think we have had the opportunity these last, it's been almost 2 hours, but we've had the opportunity to have some really important dialogue. And a quote by Dalai Lama says, "The reality today is that we're all interdependent and have to coexist on this small planet. Therefore, the only sensible and intelligent way of resolving differences and clashes of interest, whether between individuals or nations, is through dialogue." So I thank you all for being here, and I'm passing it to you, Angaza.
You gave us a Dalai Lama quote, and now I got to follow behind that. Well, I just really want to thank each and every person who is here. I know you all don't know me from Adam, but I am so excited to have all of you. And now I'm so excited to hear all of your great ideas and the things that you are putting into place for your students. Donovan is a genius, and I will be tapping into that young man's mind. It's probably like next week for more ideas. But I just want to thank each of you for the work you do on behalf of children. And just advise you every single time you make a decision, just put yourself in the shoes of a minority child. Because not only do they have to worry about getting through class and getting good grades and whether they're going to do next, but they also have that extra layer of, am I accepted? Does my teacher appreciate me? Are they racist? Are they? And it's something that even in the professional world as Black people, we carry. So I hope to see more from all of you, and I will keep track, and we'll be working in our working group to get a lot of these things done. If you need any help with anything, legs, bodies, voices, arms, just send me an email, send Daughtery an email. We're here, and we thank you. Thank you to everybody who's watching at home or on the replay for watching. And if you want to join the education working group, it is really, really full. But we'll take you because there's a lot of stuff to be done. So good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.